Alright everyone, welcome back. So, we continue on our 2024 reviews with the Buffalo Sabres, and for the 13th straight year, the Buffalo Sabres are being talked about when they're not in the playoffs. 13 years. That is a feat that I don't think a lot of teams have accomplished in the NHL's history. In fact, it might be the longest drought ever in the NHL's history. Not a record you want to have. Definitely not a record that you want to have as a Buffalo Sabres fan. Now, I do think they're moving closer. They're moving in the right direction, but they're still probably a couple of years off. I'm not going to lie to you. So, this year they finished with a 39-37-6 record for 84 points. They were 22nd in the NHL. So, you look at last year. We'll start with 22-23. They barely missed it. They missed by like 2 points. That's the closest they've come. And a lot of people had a lot of optimism this year that with relatively the same team, a few new players, some more tweaks on the blue line, we figured that they were going to maybe get over that hump, or if not, come really close yet again. But this year was another year where it seemed like for points in the season, they took a step backwards. It really did feel like that. And it just seemed that, the team that was basically the same team, as I said, just fell apart this year. They had a .512 points percentage, which is ranked 22nd. On the bright side, it is above 500, so that's good, I guess. They have scored 246 goals and let in 244 for a +2 difference. They're one of the few teams that missed the playoffs that actually had a positive goal differential. So I give Buffalo credit for that. That shows that maybe something good is coming. But they were 21-19-1 at home, and they were 18-18-5 on the road. So, yeah, the home record is decent. The away record was middling the entire year. This team just could not seem to win on the road whatsoever. In terms of goals for and goals per against, goals for, they were 2.98, which is 22nd. So, one common thing that was dealt with this year with Buffalo was that their goal scoring just vanished. It vanished in thin air. Last year, they were a really high-scoring team. Tage Thompson had a great year, and we'll get into this, but a lot of the guys on this roster had a really down season. And it just seemed like, a team that's relatively the same, again, as last year, just couldn't do it this year. It's really frustrating as a non-Buffalo Sabres fan to see that happen. They had a 2.96 goals against, which was 11th. So, above all, Goals against was better. I mean, honestly, a lot of it goes to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. We'll get into it in a little bit. But still, he deserves a lot of credit for those numbers being in a decent realm for a team that did make the playoffs. So they had a 16.6 power play percentage, which was ranked 29th. Yeah, the power play fell off a cliff this year. They also had a 79.8 penalty kill, which was 13th. So that's not bad. But regardless, power play fell off a cliff, and you can't really make the playoffs with a bad power play. I've seen a lot of teams in previous years, and even this season too. When you have a bad power play, odds are you're just not going to make the playoffs. You need that advantage on the special teams, or you need to be at least decent at the power play, not like one of the lower rankings in the league. You need to be decent at the very least. So again, just a year that's frustrating for Sabres fans. You saw a lot of improvement last year with this team, and this year it just seemed like you took a step backwards. And that has to suck for Buffalo fans. And my heart goes out to them because they've been dealing with this crap for almost 15 years now. But in terms of guys who scored this year, there's a lot of young players on this team. There's a lot of guys who definitely have the star power and the potential, but it just seemed like they couldn't get it off the ground at points this year. Alex Tuch, 75 games played, 22 goals, 37 assists, 59 points. Tuch was one of the guys who just seemed like he couldn't get off the ground. He had a few points this year where he looked good, but above all, it's still really disappointing. There were no players on this team that had above a point per game. None of them. Nobody on this team had a point per game average. So that to me is wild, and you simply just can't make the playoffs with no one above a point per game. It's disappointing. It's really disappointing to see this. How a lot of these guys just took a step backwards. Rasmus Dahlin, 81 games played, 20 goals, 39 assists, 59 points. Dahlin had a good year. I think that defensively, Dahlin's good. Offensively, He's also pretty good. I think he had a good year overall. I think he's one of the few guys in this team that had a pretty solid season. Someone who had a really down year was Tage Thompson. 71 games played, 29 goals, 27 assists for only 56 points. Last year, I think this guy had almost 100 points on a team that didn't make the playoffs. So to see Thompson score almost 40 less points is really disappointing, and it makes sense why this team just didn't make the playoffs this year. Because, again, a lot of these guys had just really bad seasons, and Thompson was one of them. Like, he didn't look like the Thompson we've seen in previous years before. The guy who would score 5 goals in a game. The guy who would get, 7 points in a single game. It wasn't that this year. He didn't have a game like that this year. And it was incredibly frustrating to watch as Sabres fans. Now, do I think he'll bounce back next year? Maybe. I'm not saying that he's going to get back to the 100-point mark. I don't think they get back to that. I just look at, realistically, he's never going to have a season like that again, most likely. But I think he can be a legitimate 80, 85-point player in his prime. I think he still can hit that. But honestly, this year just seemed like a really step in the wrong direction for him. J.J. Peterka, 82 games played, 28 goals, 22 assists for 50 points. Peterka, I've mentioned in videos before that it was a steal when he was taken in 2020. I remember when he dropped, people said that he was going to be a steal for Buffalo with that pick. And look at this, he has been. He had a pretty good year this year. I think that it's a step in the right direction for a guy who is a part of that next future or that next young core. Dylan Cozens had another really disappointing season. Cozens with 79 games played, 18 goals, 29 assists for 47 points. Another disappointing year. I mean, last year was a year that he looked good. He looked pretty solid last year, if I'm remembering correctly. This year, he's one of the big-name players that really just took a step backwards. Him and Thompson were two players who last year looked spectacular. But this year just seemed that they had a down season. I don't know what else to say. A lot of the guys in this team just didn't play well. Jeff Skinner at 6 is one of them. Skinner with a 74 games played, 24 goals, 22 assists, 46 points. Yeah, 3 more years of that at $9 million. That is not fun at all. I remember when that contract was signed. The fact that there's 3 years left on it makes me feel old. I know fans are yelling at me right now because I know there's older people who watch my videos. But Skinner, 24 goals. I mean, I think last year he had 35-40, I think. If I'm remembering correctly. I might be wrong, but if I'm remembering correctly, he had 35 goals last year. Going back to 24 is disappointing. I mean, last year he made the contract look better, but this year just really made it fall back down to reality. 7th in scoring, Owen Power, 76 games played, 6 goals, 27 assists, 33 points. I thought he had an okay year. I think there were points this year where he had some downward stretches, but I do think that Power can be the best top pairing defenseman on this team. Him and Dahlins, that's going to be the pairing of the future. But obviously, he kind of had some strides where he looked not too great this year. But obviously, some players will have a down season, of course. 8th in scoring, Zach Benson. Benson in his rookie season, I think, 71 games played, 11 goals, 19 assists for 30 points. I thought Benson, I mean, honestly, it takes a little bit for some young guys to get adjusted, but I think Benson had a pretty solid year. When you look in terms of the skill of this team, how overall obviously where this team finished in the standings, I thought Benson had a good year when you consider other things into that. 9th in scoring, Bowen Byram, who has an asterisk to him because he was acquired halfway through the season. Byram with a 73 games played, 11 goals, 18 assists for 29 points. Good defenseman, not too bad there. And then 10th in scoring, Jordan Greenway with a 67 games played, 10 goals, 18 assists for 28 points. Not bad. He's like a fourth liner. He's not terrible. I guess that's good enough numbers for a guy who was kind of this season. But above all, yeah, a disappointing year from a lot of players. A lot of guys this year had really down seasons. And that followed into the goaltending. Now, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was really good this year. He was. He really got this team a lot closer than they should have been. And he also made some of the stats, like the goals against average, the difference between goals for and goals against. He made those numbers look good. He had a 27, 22, and 4 record, a 2.57 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage. I'd say that's good numbers. I'd say that's pretty good numbers for a team that did not make the playoffs. It's kind of like Joey Dackert of Seattle, where I think Luke Honan had a really good year and honestly got this team a lot closer than they should have been. Now, moving into the other goals, you got Devin Levi. Levi, when he had that 7 games last year where he looked great, Sabres fans said that he will come into the lineup this year, get them into the playoffs. I wasn't on board with that because I thought that they were, overrating Levi too much. Because I thought, like, 7 games is good, but you see a lot of goalies in a 7-game sample play really well. Like, I remember Samuel Ersson when he played his first, 7 games. He played spectacular, and look at him now. Like there are goalies who will have really good stretches, and then you get them into, a full sample size, and they don't look great. And Levi was an example of that. 10, 8, and 2, a 3.1, and a .899. Found himself bouncing between the AHL and the NHL this year. I think he's going to be a good goalie, but I think you need to wait a little bit. There's always the year where the goalie has kind of like a not great of a season, and then they really start picking it up afterwards. Getting adjusted to the NHL is really what a lot of goalies have to learn, and I think that Levi learned that lesson this year, and I think he will be much better next year. Finally, Eric Comrie. Comrie with a 2-7-0 record, a 3.69, and a .874. I think Comrie probably leaves this free agency. Wasn't great this year whatsoever. Now, in terms of guys who were ins and outs, guys who came in and left throughout the season, you got Eric Robinson, Bowen Byram, Schlagen. Oh my God, I said this so wrong. A 4th, a 7th, and another 7th as well. So not a lot in terms of ins. Outs, Sedervis, Middlestat, Okposo, Johnson, and Devin Cooley. Not Logan Cooley, Devin Cooley. I looked at that and I said, that's Logan Cooley. No, it's Devin Cooley. So, again, not a lot there exchanging between ins and outs besides the big Middlestat Byram 1-for-1. That kind of came out of nowhere. Didn't see that coming whatsoever. But apart from that, a lot of the other moves weren't too big whatsoever. And just to wrap things up, it was a really disappointing year for the Sabres when you look in terms of just what they wanted to do this year. They didn't get closer to the playoffs. In fact, they took a step back, which is very disappointing. Now, in terms of future draft capital and UFAs and RFAs, draft capital, there is not a ton this year. Only a first, the 11th overall pick. A second, a third, 2 fourths, no fifth, 1 sixth, and 2 sevenths. Again, Buffalo expected that they would get better this year. That's what the expectation was, but it just didn't happen this year. So they do have the 11th overall pick. They have a chance to get a pretty decent player again in this year's draft. But once again, it's another year where you want to get back into the playoffs and you just can't do it. It breaks my brain, not gonna lie. UFAs and RFAs then. You got UFA, Zegmas Girgensons, Tyson Jones, Victor Olofsson, Eric Robinson, and Eric Comrie. In terms of Girgensons, probably walks. I think you want to get some more youth onto this team. Yost, maybe they keep him around. Who knows? Olofsson wouldn't surprise me if he's not on this team next year. He's been down the last 2 seasons. Robinson was maybe just a depth player. Maybe keep him around. And then Comrie. What I would imagine the Sabres are going to do is keep that Levi Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen tandem. I don't think they bring a third-string guy to come back in. So I think you're going to stick around with a Levi Luukkonen tandem next year. Maybe Comrie's the third string, but it wouldn't surprise me. And then for restricted free agents, you got Peyton Krebs, Jacob Bryson, Kale Klog, Henry Jokiharju, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So Luukkonen, if he asked for a lot of money, it wouldn't surprise me because he had a great year this year. As for the other guys, Krebs has been having down seasons. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't qualify him. Bryson, not a bad depth defenseman. Maybe they keep him around. Same with Klog, and then Jokiharju. Wouldn't surprise me if we see him move out, but he had a pretty season this year. But regardless, in terms of what this team really needs, I guess some more pieces on the blue line. I think the blue line is better than it was last year. It's better than it was at the beginning of this season. Because I think a top 4 of Dahlin, Byram, Power, and someone else I think could be good. I think that's a good step in the right direction for sure. But there is some things they still need to improve on, like some depth, for sure. There's a lot of youth on this team, so it wouldn't surprise me if they miss the playoffs next year. But regardless, they still have a relatively bright future. I think you just need to get over that hump. And it's a hard thing to do in these days of the playoffs. It's in these days of the NHL. It's hard to get over that hump back into the playoffs. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on the Buffalo Sabres this season. I will be making my Philadelphia Flyers one tomorrow. Expecting a much longer video for that. But regardless, thank you all for watching. If you enjoy, make sure to like, subscribe down below. I greatly appreciate it. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.